actually going through the process again, that was one of a process which felt both slow and at the same time very fast. You end up going to the hospital. I had a lot of family with me. I had my partner and both parents came with me in the morning, which was fantastic. And you go into a room, you get changed into your gown, and you're left waiting for a little while. Various people come in and check on you, and it's nice. I got to see my transplant coordinator, and then it was just going to sleep and waking up. And I really did feel like it was over in a blink. And suddenly I was waking up in a bed, and I would say I felt a little under the weather. But overall, I almost didn't believe it happened. I had to sort of lift up the gown and look down and actually see the surgery scars and think, wow, okay, that really did happen. The hardest conversation was my grandma. I think actually she might have the lowest tolerance for my personal risk. She'd like to see zero risk, and so that took a little while. I'd say for that, something I definitely looked into was making sure that when we had that conversation, that I had my dad there as well, who's someone she really trusts, so that we could have that conversation together. So it's not just me. So it's sort of a family conversation around, well, here's his decision. Okay, he supports that decision. That sort of helps reassure her. And actually, she came around surprisingly well. I think, so not a particularly anxious person, but definitely doesn't like to imagine her grandchildren in any level of danger or risk. And so that was a bit of a surprise in a way. But I think, again, really sort of making the case for the benefits to others. I think because, when you first mention it, people instantly jump to the risk, but a lot of people just aren't really aware, especially if they've not sort of come across too many people who've had kidney disease. In her case, she actually does know a couple of people that had. If they're not aware of that, they're not really aware of the sort of the benefits on the other side. And so sort of bringing that to the table, there's a reason I did. I think that if you sort of make the case, it becomes a pretty strong case for why someone should do that. And I think that really sort of helped her, and actually say, she pretty quickly went from being a bit worried to crowing to all her neighbours about what was going to happen and the whole process. So I thought that was very sweet as well. The recovery was an interesting process. I would describe it a little bit like aging backwards. You do start off feeling quite immobile. Certainly, I'd say the worst thing is the bloating from the gas that they use to expand your stomach and make it a bit easier to do the surgery. That's over pretty quickly in a couple of days. But initially, I'd say that's the most uncomfortable thing. That took a couple of days of sort of, walking around. I live with my 87-year-old grandma, and certainly when I got home, she was rushing around a lot faster than me. Quite a role reversal, her having to pick things up the floor and go and collect things for me, or beating me in foot races down the street when I do my walks. So that was definitely interesting. But day by day, it really did feel, every day I'd wake up and I'd feel sort of multiple times better. I could suddenly sort of walk around the block, and then I could walk to the shops, and then I could walk even further. It depends on what job you're doing. I have quite a sort of a desk-based job, so I was back to work in about 2 weeks' time, which was relatively quick. I think some people do take slightly longer, but is possible to sort of get back to feeling okay in that time. The whole recovery process, of course, lasts longer than that. I'd say I'm now sitting here about sort of, say 4 or 5 months out, because the math in my head isn't great. About 4 or 5 months out, and I think at this point, it's almost to the level where day to day you start to forget about it. And that's not that you don't remember that it happened and sometimes think, wow, that's sort of a crazy thing that happened. But it's more that sort of you might think, well, this is going to be something that's really on your mind, especially in those first week, 2 weeks, when it's there's quite a lot of discomfort. You might think, well, this might last for a while, but it really does sort of fade into the background, and pretty soon you sort of, you're more worried about, going to miss that bus, or what am I going to make for lunch next week, rather than I'm missing an organ or missing half of an overall organ. So I think the recovery has been a really smooth process, which has been really fantastic. Back to exercise. So I mean, before that, I was doing a lot of exercise. It's something that's always been a big part of my life. It's sort of running and calisthenics. I do pole dance as a hobby, which is probably the worst thing you can do post abdominal surgery, but it is something I'm sort of getting back into now. Is really fantastic and sort of starting to build that back up again. So yeah, overall, I'd say I think that the whole process was really smooth. I mean, it can really depend on person to person, but I think it's going to be something that's I'm definitely gonna treasure for life. It's a really, I mean, I can already feel that. I mean, it's a really meaningful thing, and just more and more as you sort of after you do it, you start to think more about what that might mean for someone else. And I mean, I never sort of say to anyone this is something you should do, but it's definitely something I'm a big advocate for. I think it's something people should look into.